My name is Ryan Carter. I'm 28 years old, and for the past 5 years, I've worked as a senior logistics coordinator at Apex Distribution, one of the largest supply chain companies on the West Coast, headquartered in Seattle. On paper, it looks like a solid, respectable career. In reality, I'm running on empty most days. I handle my regular office hours from 8 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. But almost every evening and most weekends, I'm out on the road, doing rideshare and food delivery gigs. I don't do it for fun or extra pocket money. I do it because 2.5 years ago, my father suffered a severe stroke that nearly took his rods, emergency surgery, months of hospital stays, rehabilitation, and ongoing therapy wiped out every savings account we had. My mother had passed away while I was still in college, and my dad had already spent most of his retirement money helping me finish my degree. When he got sick, walking away wasn't an option, so I kept the day job, added the night work, and funneled every single extra dollar toward his medical bills. Sleep became something I barely remembered. Exhaustion wasn't a feeling anymore. It was just my normal state. That Friday night in late October, I was beyond drained. I had already finished a 12-hour delivery shift and was about to log off the app when a last-minute rideshare request popped up in Belltown. It was almost 1:15 a.m. The payout was decent, and I knew that extra $80 could cover part of my father's upcoming physical therapy session. I accepted the ride. When I pulled up outside the crowded bar, she was standing under a streetlight, looking slightly unsteady. She was in her mid-20s, wearing a sophisticated deep emerald green dress that hugged her figure elegantly. Her auburn hair cascaded over one shoulder, a little messy from the night out. She carried herself with natural grace, even while tipsy. She slid into the back seat and gave me a soft, tired smile. "Sophia," she said, when I asked her name. The ride started quietly. She stared out the window at the rainy Seattle streets. After a few minutes, she began talking. Small, easy conversation about the city, how much she loved the rain, how tiring long nights could be. Her voice was warm and intelligent. There was something magnetic about her, even in her slightly intoxicated state. About 20 minutes into the drive toward Capitol Hill, she suddenly sat up and touched her wrist. "Damn," she muttered. "My bracelet. It must have slipped off." We both searched the back seat, but it was nowhere to be found. She seemed more upset than the situation warranted, but I chalked it up to the alcohol. When we finally reached her apartment building, I helped her out of the car and made sure she got inside safely. Only after I drove away did I notice it. A delicate gold bracelet with a small emerald charm, lying on the floor mat in the back seat. It was beautiful, clearly expensive but not flashy, the kind of piece that meant something to its owner. I sat in the parking lot of my own building for a long time, turning the bracelet over in my hands. I could have dropped it at the company's lost and found the next day. That would have been the easiest choice. But something told me to return it personally. Maybe it was exhaustion making me sentimental. Maybe it was the memory of her smile. Either way, I decided I would drive it back to her the next morning. The following day, after only 4 hours of sleep, I showered, changed into decent clothes, and drove back to her building in Capitol Hill. My hands were slightly nervous as I knocked on her door. When she opened it, Sophia looked completely different, fresh-faced, wearing a simple white sweater and jeans, her hair tied back. She was stunning, and she didn't look particularly surprised to see me. "You came back," she said softly, a small smile touching her lips. I held out the bracelet. "You left this in my car last night. I thought you might be missing it." She took the bracelet from my hand, but instead of just thanking me and closing the door, she stepped aside. "Come in for a minute, please. I'd like to thank you properly." I hesitated for a second, but stepped inside. Her apartment was bright, modern, and tastefully decorated with large windows overlooking the city. She poured me a cup of coffee and then turned to face me, holding the bracelet. "I left it with you on purpose," she said, looking directly into my eyes. "I wanted you to find me again." The words hung in the air between us. I stood there completely stunned, coffee cup frozen halfway to my mouth. This elegant, confident woman had deliberately left her bracelet in my car, so I would have a car. The confession was so unexpected, so bold, that for a moment I couldn't find any words. Why would she do that? Who was she, and what was I getting myself into by standing in her apartment, heart suddenly racing? Knowing this encounter was no longer simple. That single decision to return the bracelet changed the entire direction of my life, because 2 days later, I walked into our company's all-hands meeting and discovered that Sophia Langford, the woman who had intentionally left her bracelet in my car, was the newly appointed vice president of operations. She was now my boss. The conference room felt smaller than usual that Monday morning. I sat in the third row, still exhausted from the weekend, when Sophia Langford walked in, wearing a sharp black pantsuit. She moved with quiet confidence as she took her place at the front. When her eyes scanned the room and landed on me, something shifted in her expression, a flicker of recognition mixed with that same subtle smile she had worn in her apartment. My stomach dropped. She was introduced as the new vice president of operations for the West Coast Division. The woman whose bracelet I had returned was now directly overseeing my department. My mind raced. How was this possible? Of all the people in Seattle, the passenger I had driven home had turned out to be one of the most powerful executives in my company. After the meeting ended, I tried to leave quickly, but her assistant caught me. "Ms. Langford would like to see you in her office." I walked in with my heart hammering. Her corner office had floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a breathtaking view of Puget Sound. Sophia closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit. "Ryan," she said calmly, "I meant what I said on Saturday. I left the bracelet on purpose. I wanted to see what kind of person you were. Most drivers wouldn't have bothered returning it personally. I didn't know how to respond. I was just trying to do the right thing." She studied me for a long moment. "That's exactly why I hoped you'd come back." Over the next few weeks, Sophia's presence became impossible to ignore. She started attending operations meetings, asking sharp, intelligent questions about route optimization, driver retention, and supply chain bottlenecks. On the surface, everything was strictly professional. But there were small moments that only I noticed. The way her eyes would linger on me a second, longer than necessary. The private smile when no one else was looking. And the occasional late-night text that had nothing to do with work. Then the rumors started spreading like wildfire. Someone had apparently seen me leaving her apartment building that Saturday morning. Within days, the office gossip mill was in full swing. People whispered that I was getting special treatment. My suggestions in meetings were suddenly being praised. A promotion opportunity that had been stalled for over a year was suddenly back on the table. Marcus Hale, a senior manager who had always viewed me as competition, began making snide remarks in the break room. His friend Trevor Sands started taking credit for projects and reports I had spent weeks developing. The pressure built fast. I was already barely surviving, finishing my day job, rushing into rideshare until midnight, then waking up at 5 a.m. to help my father with his morning routine. Now I had to navigate a toxic environment where everyone assumed I was sleeping my way up the ladder. The truth was far simpler and more complicated. I had barely even kissed Sophia. We had shared coffee and honest conversations, but nothing more. One rainy Thursday evening, Sophia texted me, "Meet me for coffee? Off the record, I know this is getting difficult for you." I almost declined. But something pulled me to the small cafe near the waterfront. She was already there, dressed casually in a sweater and jeans, looking more like the woman from the car ride than the powerful VP. We sat in a quiet corner and talked for nearly 2 hours. She told me about the immense pressure of being one of the youngest VPs in the company, about how lonely leadership could feel, and how my quiet integrity that night had stood out to her. I opened up too, more than I planned. I told her about my father's stroke, the crushing medical debt, the 3 jobs, and why I was always exhausted. She listened without pity, only quiet respect. When we left the cafe that night, she gently touched my arm. "I didn't mean to complicate your life, Ryan, but I'm not sorry I left that bracelet." The situation continued to deteriorate at work. Marcus and Trevor escalated their campaign. Important reports I prepared mysteriously got altered. My ideas were presented by others in leadership meetings. During a major client presentation, Trevor openly questioned my data in front of everyone. The stress was becoming unbearable. I started questioning whether staying at the company was worth it anymore. Late one night, after another long rideshare shift, I sat in my small apartment and began drafting my resignation letter. My hands trembled as I typed. 5 years of hard work, of loyalty, of quietly carrying my family's burdens, and it was all slipping away because I had done one decent thing, returning a bracelet to a woman who had wanted to be found. The next morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I printed my resignation letter, placed it neatly on my desk, and went about my regular duties as if nothing had changed. Inside, I felt completely empty. 5 years of dedication, of late nights, of sacrificing my own health for my father's care. It was all ending because of a single bracelet and the complicated feelings it had created. I moved through the day like a shadow. Around 2 p.m., Sophia's assistant called me upstairs. When I entered her office, she was standing by the window, holding a printed copy of my resignation letter. Her expression was serious. "You were really planning to leave without saying anything to me?" she asked quietly. "I didn't want to make things harder for you," I replied. "The rumors are getting out of control. Marcus and Trevor are making my daily life miserable. If I stay, people will keep assuming I'm only getting ahead because of our whatever this is. If I leave, at least I can keep some dignity." Sophia was silent for a long moment. Then she did something I never expected. She walked to her desk, picked up a thick folder, and spread its contents across the table in front of me. It contained printed emails, document version histories, timestamp records, and comparison reports. "I've been investigating quietly," she said. "While you were writing this letter, I was gathering proof. Marcus has been altering your reports for weeks. Trevor has been claiming credit for the Northwest Efficiency Plan you designed 3 months ago. They've been systematically undermining you because they feel threatened, and because they believe you're receiving favoritism from me." I stared at the evidence in disbelief. Everything I had suspected was laid out clearly with cold, hard facts. Sophia had done all of this without me asking. "Why are you risking so much for me?" I asked. She looked me straight in the eyes. "Because I saw the kind of man you are the night you drove me home. And I saw it again when you returned my bracelet, even though your life was already overwhelming. You deserve someone fighting for you, Ryan." The following Wednesday, Sophia called an emergency leadership meeting. The entire operations team, including Marcus and Trevor, was required to attend. The tension in the room was thick. Sophia stood at the head of the table, calm and commanding, and began presenting. She laid out the evidence one piece at a time. Original documents with my creation timestamps, the altered versions submitted by Marcus, the presentation Trevor had given using my exact data and analysis without any credit. She even played a recorded audio clip where the two men were caught joking about taking care of the golden boy. The room fell into stunned silence. "This is not a difference of opinion," Sophia said firmly. "This is a deliberate pattern of intellectual theft and character assassination. It ends today." Marcus tried to interrupt and defend himself, but Sophia cut him off with ice-cold precision. By the end of the meeting, both Marcus and Trevor were placed under immediate formal HR investigation. They were temporarily stripped of any authority over the operations department. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. Colleagues who had been avoiding me or whispering behind my back now looked visibly uncomfortable. After the meeting, Sophia asked me to stay behind. Once the room was empty, she closed the door and exhaled deeply. "I know this makes everything even more complicated," she said, "but I couldn't stand by and watch them destroy you." That evening, instead of logging into rideshare, I drove straight to Sophia's apartment. When she opened the door, I didn't hesitate. I stepped inside, pulled her close, and kissed her. Really kissed her, for the first time. All the tension, fear, and unspoken feelings of the past weeks poured out in that moment. She kissed me back with equal intensity. But even as our relationship began to bloom, I knew the challenges were far from over. She was still a vice president. I still worked in her division. The company had strict policies about relationships. My father's medical situation remained fragile, and although the rumors had quieted, they had not disappeared completely. For the first time in years, however, I didn't feel completely alone in carrying my burdens. Over the next several months, my relationship with Sophia grew slowly, carefully, and deeply. At the office we maintained strict professionalism. No lingering looks, no private conversations, no special treatment. But after work, in the hidden corners of Seattle, we began building something real and meaningful. We took long walks along Alki Beach at sunset, shared quiet dinners in small restaurants in Fremont and Ballard, and spent peaceful evenings at her apartment, talking about life, work, fears, and dreams. Sophia was nearly 10 years older than me, a fact that occasionally made me pause. She had climbed the corporate ladder through intelligence, relentless work, and personal sacrifice. She had given up relationships, family time, and personal peace to reach the position she held. I, on the other hand, was still struggling with heavy medical debt and the exhaustion of balancing multiple jobs. One Sunday afternoon, Sophia insisted on meeting my father. I was nervous bringing her to our modest house in Ballard, but she was warm, respectful, and genuinely kind. She didn't treat my father like a patient or a burden. She spoke to him like a person, asking about his years working as a shipyard engineer, laughing at his dry humor, and even helping him with some of his physical therapy exercises, without making it feel like charity. Watching them interact softened something deep inside me. Later that night, after Sophia left, my father pulled me aside. "She's a good woman, Ryan. Strong, but don't let her carry everything for you. You've spent too many years carrying the world on your own shoulders." As our relationship deepened, the challenges became more apparent. We formally disclosed our relationship to HR, as required by company policy. Even though Sophia had completely recused herself from any decisions regarding my pay, promotions, or performance reviews, the whispers in the office never fully died. Some people were supportive. Others continued to look at me with suspicion, as if every achievement I had was now tainted. The biggest test came when my father had a sudden health setback that required emergency treatment. New bills pushed me to my limit. I quietly started picking up late-night rideshare shifts again, hiding it from Sophia because I didn't want her to feel like she had to fix my problems. She found out anyway. One night she showed up at my apartment past midnight and saw me still wearing my rideshare jacket, looking completely drained. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, hurt clear in her voice. "Because I don't want to be the guy who needs saving," I answered honestly. "I've spent the last 2.5 years barely surviving. I can't let this relationship turn me into someone who depends on you for everything." We had our first real argument that night. It was painful, but necessary. Sophia admitted that she had learned to solve problems with money and influence because that was how she had survived in a cutthroat corporate world. I told her I needed a real partner, not a rescuer. We sat on my small couch for hours, talking through our fears and differences. In the end, we reached a compromise. She helped me connect with a better financial advisor who restructured my father's two's remaining debt into something manageable. I promised to stop hiding my struggles from her. Through everything, the bracelet remained our private symbol. Sophia still wore it often. Sometimes she would touch it and give me a small, knowing smile, a silent reminder of how strangely and beautifully our story had begun. Just as things started feeling stable, life threw another major challenge. The company announced a significant restructuring, and Sophia was being strongly considered for the position of Chief Operating Officer. It was a huge promotion, but one that would create even more distance and scrutiny between us. I began wondering whether our relationship could survive the pressure, or if returning that bracelet had set us on a path that was ultimately too complicated to last. Yet every time I looked at Sophia, I remembered the night I stood in her apartment, holding that emerald bracelet. And every time, I felt grateful that I had decided to come back. 6 months later, the major regional expansion project I had been leading was successfully completed ahead of schedule. The independent review board, with no involvement from Sophia, promoted me to regional project director of operations, based entirely on merit and results. For the first time in years, I felt like my hard work was truly seen. That same week, I made the final payment on my father's remaining medical debt. The relief was overwhelming. After nearly 3 years of constant struggle, I could finally breathe without calculating every extra shift or lost hour of sleep. On a beautiful clear evening in early June, I drove Sophia out to a quiet, scenic spot along the Olympic Peninsula. The sun was setting over the water, casting a golden glow across the waves. We walked slowly along the rocky shoreline, her hand comfortably in mine. She was wearing the same delicate gold bracelet with the emerald charm, the one that had started our entire story. I stopped walking and turned to face her. My heart was beating harder than it had the morning I returned that bracelet to her door. "Sophia," I began, my voice thick with emotion. 2.5 years ago, I was completely lost. Working 3 jobs, exhausted beyond words. Watching my father's health decline while barely keeping us afloat. Then I picked up one last passenger late at night. She left something valuable in my car. I could have ignored it. I could have dropped it at Lost and Found. But something made me drive back to return it personally. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia's eyes widened, already filling with tears. "You told me you had left it on purpose, so I would find you again. That single decision changed my life. You saw me at my lowest and still chose me. You fought for me when I was ready to quit. You taught me that accepting love and support doesn't make me weak. It just means I finally found someone worth trusting completely." I dropped to one knee on the cool stones, opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring with a single emerald that perfectly matched her bracelet, and asked, "Sophia Langford, you are the strongest, kindest, and most remarkable woman I have ever known. Will you marry me, and keep finding new ways for us to come back to each other for the rest of our crossed lives?" Tears streamed down her face as she laughed through them. That same warm, genuine laugh I had first heard on the night I drove her home. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, with pure joy, "Yes, Ryan. Of course I will." I stood up and kissed her deeply, as the waves gently crashed behind us. She held me tight, the bracelet pressed against my back like a quiet promise. We had a beautiful, but intimate wedding the following spring, in a seaside venue, just outside Guelph, Seattle. My father walked me down the aisle, emotional and proud. Sophia's family came from New York. A few close colleagues, including some drivers who had known me from my hardest days, attended. It wasn't a corporate spectacle, just the people who truly mattered. In her vows, Sophia said, "I left that bracelet in your car because something in me recognized a good man. What I didn't realize was that I was actually leaving it so I could finally find my way home." In my vows, I told her, "You didn't just save me from drowning. You taught me how to swim beside someone, instead of fighting the current alone." Life after marriage wasn't perfect. We still had arguments, especially about work boundaries and my stubborn independence. Sophia sometimes defaulted to fixing problems with resources and influence. I still occasionally withdrew when things felt heavy, but we never stopped choosing each other. We learned to communicate better, to lean on one another without losing ourselves. On quiet evenings, we would sometimes drive past her old apartment building in Capitol Hill. Sophia would touch the bracelet on her wrist and smile at me. "I left it with you so you'd find me again," she'd say softly. And every time, I would reply, "Best decision I ever made, coming back for it." Because sometimes life doesn't change with grand, dramatic gestures. It changes in small, unexpected moments. When an exhausted driver decides to return a lost brain purse, instead of ignoring it. When one woman takes a brave chance on a stranger. When 2 people choose to fight for something real, despite all the complications. I came back to return her bracelet that morning, and in doing so, I found the love, the peace, and the future I never knew I was searching for.